The predator bulldozed her aside. Deathworld girl caught him and launched him off the dock. The manifest scrolled in, 47 line items, standard cargo, human crew. Pelin Orvash processed it the way he processed every manifest on the morning shift, left to right, field by field, collar patches pale and flat against his neck, the way they always were when nothing was wrong. The freighter in Bay 7 looked like it had argued with a recycling compactor and lost. 3 of its hull plates were patched with emergency foam still white at the edges. Its registration number had been re-stenciled twice, badly. The venting from the starboard coupling had been going for 6 minutes, which meant the captain either didn't know or had decided it wasn't worth stopping for. Pelin checked the captain's field. Rain, S species, human, origin world, blank. The form did not require it. He could hear her through the open channel audio, already at the docking desk, already talking. Not about the venting, not about the foam patches, about the docking fees. She had strong opinions about the docking fees. She was making them known while her ship bled oxygen into Bay 7's recycling system, and the docking tech across the counter from her had the expression of someone who had decided that agreeing was faster than explaining. Pelin pulled the species average combat metrics for human crew. He looked at the numbers, he looked at her. She was 1.67 meters. The form listed her weight as 62 kilograms. She had a worn cargo hook on her belt, hand-forged by the look of it, the grip wrapped in fiber that had been replaced so many times the original material was probably long gone. He tagged it, personal item, non-regulated, no threat classification required. He filed it inert and moved on. 40 seconds after opening the file, he stamped it. Yellow passive, non-combatant, no direct action clearance. He commed Dreth Solus for confirmation. Dreth Solus was the senior compliance warden, and his collar patches were always pale. He had been in the system for 31 years and had never had them go amber on a procedural call. He did not look up from his own console. Human with a cargo manifest, yellow passive, the math is clean. Pelin closed the file. He had 46 other manifests to process. He did not think about Sable Rain again for 11 minutes. What I watched that shift, I still don't have the right word for it. Stay with me. 11 minutes later, the breach alarm fired. Pelin looked up. His board went red across 4 sections simultaneously: base shields, external defense grid, close-range proximity. He pulled the contact data. 2 Rakthian cruisers, heavy class, dropping out of fold space at point-blank range. No declaration, no warning signal, no flight plan in the system. They were simply there, the way a dropped object is simply on the floor a moment after it falls. He activated the platform's automated defense turrets, all 8 of them. They were old. The platform had never been a military installation, and the turrets had been installed during a threat tier review cycle that Pelin had read about in the compliance history files, but never expected to be relevant. They fired. The Rakthian cruiser shields absorbed every shot without comment, the way a wall absorbs a thrown piece of fruit. Pelin pulled the VTCS threat model. Vanthai Threat Tier Classification System, in use for 230 standard cycles across 400 registered species, never successfully contested. He ran the projection for a Rakthian boarding action at this platform's current staffing level, security rating, and armament status. The number it returned was 84%. That was the projected survival rate for platform personnel without external combat support. Pelin looked at it for a moment. He did not say it aloud. He commed Dreth Solus. Dreth Solus was already moving. Pelin could hear the particular sound of the senior warden's chair rolling back, and then footsteps, and then the tone of someone who had found a procedure for this and intended to follow it. Section locked on protocol. Non-combat classified crew to designated shelter zones immediately. The system accounts for them. Confirm all yellow passive, and below are clear of primary corridors. Confirmed, Pelin said, and turned to his security feed. Bay 7, Corridor C access, the feed from the junction outside the breach corridor. Sable Rain was walking toward it, not running, not hesitating, walking, the same pace she had used to cross the docking deck to argue about fees, the cargo hook on her belt, her jacket still zipped against Bay 7's draft. Pelin watched her cross the camera threshold and kept watching as she moved down Corridor C toward the section that his board was now flagging as breach imminent. He keyed his comm. Crew of the R, he checked the registration. The freighter's name had also been re-stenciled. Twice. Crew of the Vosren, please confirm you are relocating to the designated non-action shelter zone per your assigned threat tier classification. The channel crackled, a pause, not a long one. Then, sure, which one? She did not break stride. Pellin's patches did not go amber, not yet. He would note this later, when he was writing the incident report and trying to be accurate. At this moment they were still pale. He had filed the form. The form said yellow passive. The form was the system, and the system did not produce errors. What he was watching was probably a non-combatant who did not understand the protocol and needed to be redirected before she put herself in danger. He sent the shelter zone coordinates to her comm unit. He got a read receipt. He turned back to his board and spent 45 seconds attempting to reach Rakthian command channels with a standard warning signal. The signal went unanswered. He filed a distress ping to the Helix Prime Regional Response Network, which would take, at minimum, 19 minutes to acknowledge. The breach hit at Section C4. Pellin pulled the feed. The boarding party came through in a column. Raxian raiders, powered armor, killed tally spikes on the pauldrons of the lead figure. Platform security met them at the junction, 8 officers, the best Pellin had on shift. They held for 40 seconds. Then the lead raider walked through the security line the way water moves through a gap, and the line reorganized itself into a retreat. One officer was down, not moving quickly. The rest were backing toward the secondary checkpoint. I need redactive personnel on the general channel, Pellin said, and was aware, even as he said it, that he did not have any. Platform 63 was a cargo transit hub. It had compliance officers and docking techs and 8 security officers, none of whom were rated above orange secondary. The channel returned silence for 3 full seconds. Then I've got the left side. Someone cover the right. The voice was calm, not the calm of someone trained to be calm in emergencies. The calm of someone who had not yet decided this was an emergency. Pellin checked the feed. C3 junction, the corridor that branched left off the main breach path. The figure in the cargo jacket had her back to the camera, and she was moving toward 2 raiders who had split off from the main column. Pellin opened his mouth to repeat the shelter zone directive. He closed it. The 2 raiders in C3 did not come back out of the left corridor. He watched the feed for the next 90 seconds with the kind of attention he usually reserved for procedural audits. The right side of the breach corridor was still contested. The security officers were using the checkpoint barriers and holding, but barely. The main raider column was advancing toward the platform core. On C3, the feed showed the edge of something he could not quite resolve. Movement, angles wrong for what he would have expected, the sound through the corridor mic of something heavy impacting the deck. Twice. He pulled up a second window and ran the incident report template. His compliance instincts had decided the paperwork was coming, and it was better to have the headers ready. On feed C3, she stepped back into the junction. She had a sidearm in her right hand, not hers. The finish was Raxian alloy, which meant she had acquired it in the last 90 seconds. She held it for a moment, then set it on the deck and left it there. The cargo hook was still on her belt, exactly where it had been when Pellin had stamped it inert. She was looking down the main corridor toward the breach point, and Govrak, the lead raider, the one with the most tally spikes, was looking back at her. He was 2.5 meters tall. His armor added another 40 kilograms to a frame that was already built for this kind of work. His collar patches, he didn't have collar patches, he had a helmet speaker, and what came through it was a sound Pellin's translation matrix rendered as amusement, audible amusement, through the helmet in front of his unit. I'm going to give you 1 more second to think about this, Sable Rain said. Govrak kept laughing. Pellin's patches started going amber. Govrak stopped laughing first. That was the thing Pellin would note in his incident report, under the heading Sequence of Events, Corridor C3 to C-Main Junction, which was a heading he had not used before on any compliance filing in 11 years of service. The laughter stopped, and the silence that replaced it had a different texture, Not the silence of someone who had run out of amusement, but the silence of someone recalibrating. His unit did not move. They were waiting for the commander's read, which was standard Raxian combat doctrine, which Pelin knew because the compliance training included a species behavior appendix, which he had read, and which had never before been relevant on a cargo platform. She had not moved either. The corridor feed was low resolution. Platform 63's cameras were rated for inventory tracking, not tactical observation, but Pelin could see enough. She stood at the C3 junction with her hands loose at her sides. The Rakthian sidearm was on the deck behind her where she'd left it. The cargo hook was on her belt. She looked like someone waiting for a shuttle. Pelin became aware that he had stopped filing the incident report template and had not started anything else. He made himself cross-reference the bay lockdown options. The platform's section seal console required a compliance-grade authorization, his authorization. He had the ability to lock down corridors C1 through C9 right now. He opened the interface. He looked at it. He looked at the feed. She was still standing there. He minimized the interface and kept watching. A Vanthai combat officer appeared on feed C2. His name was Torvin. He was orange secondary tier, legitimately rated, combat certified, classified 2 full levels above Sable Rain on every metric the VTCS used. He had been assigned to the secondary checkpoint and had held it through the first push. He came around the corner at the C2 junction with a containment baton in both hands and a posture that Pelin recognized from the compliance training materials as active threat engagement stance. He was going toward the Raxian on the side corridor rather than toward the main column, which was tactically sound because the side corridor was the reinforcement route, and if the raiders secured it, the lockdown options became much worse. He made it 11 steps into the corridor. The Raxian there picked him up, held him at arm's length, the way you hold something you are trying to read the label on, examined him for a moment, set him down facing the opposite direction. Torvin sat down on the deck. His containment baton was still in his hands. He did not get up quickly. Pelin watched this and then looked back at feed C3. The main column had not moved. Govrak had not moved. Sable Rain had not moved. She was watching Govrak the way a person watches a door they are waiting for someone to open. The hull foam dispenser in Section C was making a low cycling sound. Pelin had not known the dispensers made a sound. He had not thought about the hull foam dispensers in C-section since his onboarding briefing 4 years ago, when a safety officer had pointed at a wall panel and said something about breach containment, and Pelin had noted it and filed it and moved on. The cycling sound meant someone was doing something to the dispenser. He could not tell what. 2 of Sable's crew were visible on the bay cameras, moving in Bay 7. One was at the hydraulic junction. The other had the C-section access panel open and was doing something with the manual override routing. Pelin looked at this. He looked at the hull foam cycling sound. He looked at the cargo hook on her belt. He went back to the lockdown interface and opened it again. The main column had started moving. Govrak had made a decision, and the decision was that this could proceed. He pointed 2 fingers down the corridor toward the platform core. The unit began to advance. He himself stayed at the junction, and Pelin understood why. He was waiting to see what she would do when his unit walked past her. It was a test. It was not a combat move. It was a management decision, the kind a commander makes when he wants information about whether something in front of him is a threat or an obstacle. She let them pass. Pelin's patches went fully amber. This was wrong. This was exactly wrong. She had been in the breach corridor. She had cleared the left side. She had stopped the reinforcement advance without taking a single hit that Pelin had seen, and she was letting the main column walk past her toward the core. He grabbed his comm. He was going to say something. He did not know what. "The hydraulics are on," said one of her crew over the open channel. Bay 7 patched in. She had left the channel open, which meant she had wanted Pelin to hear it, or had not thought about whether he could. "Good," she said. "Stay there until I say." Govrak had turned to look at her. The main column was continuing past. She was watching the commander. "The platform," she said, "is going to lock the breach corridor in about 4 minutes." She was talking to Govrak. Pelin was also going to lock the breach corridor in about 4 minutes, apparently, which was information he had not had 30 seconds ago about his own plans. He looked at the lockdown interface. He looked at the 4-minute window it would take to complete the section seal from his current authorization level. He looked at feed C3. After that, she said, still in the same tone she had used for the docking fees, your reinforcement route is closed, your boarding party is cut off from the ship, and you have a platform full of people who are going to be very motivated to help with the paperwork. So, she tilted her head, you could leave now. Govrak's helmet speaker produced a sound. It was not laughter this time. Or, he said, and his translation came through with the particular formal register Raxian commanders used when they had decided something, which Pelin also knew from the appendix. I could walk past you. You could try that, she said. He charged. The thing about it was the mass. Pelin had pulled her weight from the manifest files 62 kilograms against 4.3 times that in the armor alone, not counting the frame underneath, and the charge covered the distance between them in 2 steps, which was fast enough that Pelin's feed could not fully resolve it at the camera's frame rate. Govrak grabbed her with both hands, one at the shoulder, one at the collar of her jacket. He lifted. He shoved. She went down. It was a full-body dismissal. It was BS7 made physical, all the math that the VTCS had decided was relevant rendered as a single motion, just one body, just one small body, and the mass differential makes this a management problem, not a combat problem. The raiders in the corridor reacted with a sound. Pelin's translation matrix registered it as something between satisfaction and confirmation. Pelin's hand moved to the emergency medical request panel. She had landed on her shoulder. She had tucked on the way down. Pelin could see it even on the low-resolution feed, the deliberate geometry of it, her left arm coming in as she hit. She was on the deck. The raiders were watching. Govrak was already turning back toward the core, already done with it. Pelin pressed the interface for the section seal. 4 minutes. He started the sequence. She came up from the roll. Not slowly, not dramatically. She just came up the way you come up from a crouch, with her feet already planted in the position she wanted, and she was looking at Govrak's back, and her expression on the feed was the same expression she had used when she said sure, which one. Govrak turned. He had heard something, some shift in the sound in the corridor, some change in the weight of the air. I gave you the second, she said. Pelin's hand was still on the medical panel. He had not sent the request. He did not send it now. He was watching. The section seal countdown read 3 minutes, 41 seconds. On feed C3, 2 of the Raxian unit members had stopped with the main column and turned back. The column itself was still moving, but something in the rear had changed. There was a gap where there had not been a gap before, and the gap had to do with the 2 raiders who had not come back out of the left corridor and the 2 who had now stopped. Pelin was not an analyst. He was a compliance officer, but he could count. Govrak's effective unit at the junction was now smaller than it had been 2 minutes ago. Pelin pulled up the Origin World supplemental registry and entered RAIN S as the search term. The system searched. It returned, Origin World field empty in manifest, cross-reference by crew biometrics required. He did not have crew biometrics on file. The form had not asked for them. He opened the lockdown interface's second window, the one that controlled the hull foam dispenser routing. He had not known, until approximately 8 minutes ago, that he had access to the hull foam dispenser routing. He found the manual override controls listed under Emergency Containment, Section C, Secondary Systems. He looked at the interface. He looked at the countdown. He looked at feed C3. 3 minutes, 9 seconds. She had not moved from the junction. Her crew was still in the bay. Torvin was sitting on the deck in C2 corridor and had recovered enough to look at feed C3, which Pelin could see because feed C2 was also on his board. Torvin was watching her the way Pelin was watching her, with the particular expression of someone reassessing a category. The main column was at the secondary checkpoint. The checkpoint had been unmanned since the first push. They were going to reach the core junction in under 2 minutes. Pelin looked at this. He looked at the section seal countdown, which would close the corridor behind the column but not catch the column itself. He looked at the hull foam interface. His collar patches were a color he did not have a name for. Not amber. Something past amber, in the direction of colors that the Vanthai Threat Awareness Scale did not formally document, because the scale was calibrated for situations that resolved within the expected parameters. Pelin reached over to his secondary console, pulled the Origin World supplemental registry back up, and began entering the biometric cross-reference request manually, field by field. He was a compliance officer. He did things by the form. He was also doing 4 other things at the same time and had been for the last 9 minutes, which was not in the form either. 2 minutes, 50 seconds. Someone should route the hull foam to the C4 breach point, she said on the open channel, before the timer. Pelin's hand was already on the interface. The foam hit. Pelin had routed it to the C4 breach point, and the manual trigger had fired, and the sound it made was not what he expected, not a hiss, not a spray, but a deep pressurized thump that he felt through the floor of the compliance station, 3 sections away. The feed from C4 went white for a moment, then resolved. 4 raiders caught mid-crossing were in the foam up to their waist joints. The foam was hardening. They were not going anywhere. The reinforcement route was sealed. Pelin stared at his feed. The main column was still at the secondary checkpoint, ahead of the sealed section, already past it, which meant they were cut off from their ship, and their ship was cut off from them. He had not planned this. She had planned this. She had told him what to do and when to do it over an open channel, while standing in a corridor with a Rakthian commander who outweighed her by a factor his console was still displaying, because he had forgotten to close that window. He closed the window. 3 minutes, 41 seconds left on the section seal countdown. The main column, 6 raiders, was at the secondary checkpoint. They had not yet figured out what had happened to their reinforcement route. They would shortly. Govrak turned back. He moved fast for something that large. Pelin would note this later. The armor did not slow him the way it should have, which was a detail about Rakthian powered armor engineering that had not been in the species behavior appendix, and which he intended to flag in his supplemental filing. 2 of the unit members were with him. The others had gone ahead and were at the checkpoint. So the junction was Govrak, 2 raiders, and her. She watched him come. He reached for her with one clawed gauntlet, the same grip he had used the first time. She moved. Not away, sideways, a small step, weight already shifted before his hand closed, and she took his wrist with both of hers and turned, pivoting at the hip, her whole body becoming a lever, and Govrak, 2.5 meters, full-powered armor, 4.3 times her mass, described an arc through the air that Pelin would later spend 11 minutes trying to calculate, arriving at the conclusion that it should not have been possible given the inputs. And then spending another 4 minutes questioning his inputs. Govrak hit the deck. The 2 unit members behind him had been close enough that the arc caught them on the way down. All 3 went down together. The sound it made through the corridor mic was significant. Pelin was running his compliance timer. He had started it when the first raider boot hit the deck, because he was a compliance officer and timing incidents was what he did when he did not know what else to do, and the timer now read 2 minutes, 9 seconds since the breach. The observation feed went quiet. The main column at the secondary checkpoint had heard it. Pelin watched them stop. Govrak got up. That was new information. Pelin registered it as such. He got up. Slowly, which was also new information about what had just happened to his armor's joint system, but he got up. He charged again. It was a different charge, lower, faster, no reaching hand. He had processed the grip and decided not to use it again. He hit her at the torso. She went with it. Not down, she absorbed the vector and redirected, her left elbow finding the gap at the articulation point of his helmet seal, which Pelin had not known had a gap, and her right knee finding the joint space at his left knee, which also apparently had a gap, and the second impact produced a sound from Govrak's helmet speaker that the translation matrix rendered as something involuntary. He went down a second time. He did not get up quickly. Pelin stopped his compliance timer. He looked at the number, 4 minutes and 17 seconds from the first raider boot on the deck to Govrak on the floor. He looked at it for a long time. He looked at the feed. Sable Rain was standing in the corridor, and she was looking at the main column, and the main column was looking back at her, and nobody was moving. She was breathing slightly harder than when she had been arguing about docking fees. That was the only visible difference. "The section seal completes in about 90 seconds, she said to the raiders at the checkpoint. "After that you can't get back to your ship. So," same tone, same tilt of the head, "you could start the paperwork now." Pelin filed the emergency containment notice for the 4 raiders in the C4 foam. He filed it with his left hand because his right hand was pulling up the Origin World supplemental registry, and he had the biometric cross-reference request already running, and the search had come back while Govrak was on the floor. Verath, Class 9. He read it, he read the line again. He opened the supplemental data entry. Atmospheric pressure, 2.3 standard. Gravitational index, 1.6 standard. Environmental hazard classification, extreme. Continuous habitation effect on human musculature and bone density. See attached survey data. He clicked the attachment. He started reading. His patches were the color they had been for the last 6 minutes, the one he did not have a word for, and they did not change. The color just meant something different now. The main column surrendered. Not all at once, not with ceremony, it was a slow reversal, the way a tide goes out, each raider arriving at the same calculation individually and reaching the same conclusion. 3 of them sat down. The other 3 backed against the checkpoint wall and stopped moving. Nobody announced it. Nobody had to. Govrak was still on the floor, getting his bearings in the way of something that had hit its articulation limits and was working through the consequences. Pelin executed the section seal. The corridor locked. He combed the regional response network and updated his distress ping from active boarding action to boarding action concluded, containment in progress. 4 personnel secured in hull foam, 6 in physical custody, lead combatant incapacitated. He sent it. He waited. He got an acknowledgement that would take, at minimum, 16 minutes to follow up. He went back to the supplemental data for Verath, Class 9. He read the attached survey data. He read the part about continuous low-gravity habituation versus continuous high-gravity habituation and what each did to muscle fiber composition over a decade. He read the part about reflex calibration in extreme hazard environments. He read the sentence that said human subjects, with 10 or more years of continuous Class 9 exposure, demonstrate measurably altered mechanical capacity, including load transfer ratios that fall outside standard species average projections. Load transfer ratios that fall outside standard species average projections. The form had 17 fields. Not one of them asked about Origin World. Not one of them asked how long she had lived there. Not one of them asked what Class 9 gravity does to a human body over a decade of cargo work. The form had 17 fields, and all 17 of them had been filled correctly, and every number had been right, and the conclusion had been wrong. Pelin opened the incident report template he had been building in the background. He opened a new field at the bottom below the standard 17. He typed, Classification Notes Supplemental. He stopped, he looked at the feed. She was at the C3 junction, talking to Torvin, who had recovered enough to stand. She was pointing at something down the corridor, one of her crew members, who had appeared from the bay access and was carrying a patch kit. Torvin was nodding. He had the expression of someone who had revised an opinion and was not yet sure how to file the revision. She looked up at the compliance camera in the C3 ceiling. She looked directly at it. She said nothing. Then she went back to pointing at the hull foam dispenser panel and saying something to her crew member that Pelin's channel recorded but could not resolve into clear audio. He looked at the blank supplemental field. He closed the incident report template without saving. The platform's emergency lighting cycled off at the 40-minute mark, which meant the automated systems had registered the breach event as concluded. The regular lighting came back up, and the Bay 7 feed sharpened and Pelin could see the Vosren in full, the patched hull plates, the re-stenciled name, the starboard coupling that had been venting when she arrived and had at some point stopped, which meant someone had fixed it, which meant her crew had been fixing the ship while she was in the corridor. He found this detail in the Bay footage records and noted it and did not know what to do with it. He pulled her crew manifest, 3 names, 1 ship. He searched each of them for origin world data. 2 had filled the field. 1, like her, had left it blank. He ran the biometric cross-reference on the blank one. The search returned, Verath, Class 9. 2 of them. She had brought 2 people from a Class 9 world onto a cargo platform and argued about docking fees and waited for a Raxian boarding party to reach the corridor before doing anything about it. And Pelin had classified both of them as non-combatant, no direct action clearance, and routed them to a shelter zone, and the shelter zone had been empty the entire time. He sat back in his chair. On the bay feed, one of her crew was checking the hull foam patch quality with a light and a hand tool. The other was inside the Vosren. From the manifest, this was the order they always ran post-incident: hull check, then engine check, then feed dispute. They had a procedure for this. They had a procedure for the aftermath of a boarding action, the way other crews had a procedure for customs declarations. This was not an unusual event for them. It had never been an unusual event for them. Pelin looked at the VTCS interface. He looked at the field that said threat tier classification. He looked at where it said yellow passive. He looked at the supplemental field he had opened and closed without saving. Outside in the corridor, Govrak's unit was being moved to the containment area by the platform's remaining security staff, who had arrived from the secondary checkpoint looking at Govrak with the expression of people who had expected to find a different situation. Govrak himself walked under his own power, which was something, but he walked with his left leg slightly wrong, and the joint gap at his knee was now visible even at camera resolution. She had not used a weapon. The cargo hook was on her belt. She had not used anything that was not already in the corridor. Pelin thought about this. He thought about what it meant that she had arrived on a damaged ship and argued about docking fees and carried a grandfather's cargo hook and filled out 17 fields and left the 18th one blank. And he thought about what the supplemental data said about load transfer ratios outside standard projections. And he thought about what that meant for what she had actually been doing in the corridor, not what she had done, but what she had decided not to do. The thought arrived fully formed, the way compliance conclusions did when the data finally assembled. She had been holding back. Not the throw, not the knee and the elbow. Those had been controlled already. He had the footage. He had watched her find the articulation gaps with the precision of someone who knew where they were, who had calibrated the input to produce incapacitation and not the worse option. But the worse option had existed. The worse option had been there the entire time, and she had not used it. Pelin opened the incident report template again. He opened the supplemental field. He typed 2 words and stopped. He did not know what the next sentence was yet, but he knew it was going to take him a while to arrive at. The 2 words were classification notes. He had typed them and stopped because the next word was the problem. The next word was either supplemental, which meant he was adding a note to an existing valid classification, which implied the classification was valid, or error, which was a word the VTCS had a formal process for, a process that had never been used in 230 standard cycles and required a senior warden's countersignature and a full system review. He looked at both options. He looked at the feed from Bay 7, where the Vosren sat with its patched hull and its corrected name and its crew of 2 people from a Class 9 world who had a procedure for the aftermath of boarding actions. He typed supplemental and kept going. Crew member Rain, S. Origin World Cross-Reference completed post-incident. Verath, Class 9. Gravitational Index 1.6 Standard, continuous exposure, confirmed via supplemental registry. Standard species average combat metrics used for initial classification do not account for Origin World environmental data. VTCS Field 1 through 17 completed accurately. Classification output, yellow passive. Classification output recommendation, pending senior warden review. He stopped, he read it back. It was the most accurate thing he had ever written, and it described a mistake without using the word. He saved it and opened the senior warden notification template. Dreth Solus arrived 22 minutes after the breach alarm had first sounded. He came through the compliance station door with his data pad and the expression of someone who had rehearsed the assessment portion of this conversation on the walkover. He had the VTCS incident protocol open on screen. He had his patches at pale neutral, which meant he had decided this was a procedural event and he was the procedure. He looked at Pelin's board. He looked at the feed from the containment area where Govrak's unit was being logged. He looked at Govrak, who was sitting on a bench and holding his left knee with one gauntlet. Dreth Soluz looked at Pelin. Pelin turned his monitor so the senior warden could read the supplemental field. He poured himself a half cup of water from the carafe on the secondary console. He did not drink it. He waited. Dreth Soluz read the supplemental field. He read it again. He pulled up the VTCS interface on his own pad and opened the field 17 dropdown and scrolled past it, looking for the field that should have been there. He found the end of the form. He went back to the supplemental registry and looked up Verath, Class 9, the same way Pelin had looked it up, and read the same sentence about load transfer ratios and standard species average projections. His patches went amber. Slowly, the way Pelin's had in the first minute after the breach alarm. The way they go when someone is running a calculation they had not expected to need. Dreth Soluz set his data pad down on the console edge. He was quiet for long enough that Pelin heard the hull foam in C4 settling, a small crackling sound as it finished hardening. The form has 17 fields, Dreth Soluz said. Yes, Pelin said. None of them are the right one. No. Dreth Soluz picked his data pad back up. He opened the senior warden notification template, not the one Pelin had sent him, a different one, the one marked System Directive, Classification Protocol Revision. Pelin had never seen it opened before. He was not sure he had known it existed. All Origin World data, Dreth Soluz said, while he typed, will be cross-referenced against the class registry before threat tier classification is finalized. He did not look up. A supplemental field will be added to the form. 18 fields, Pelin said. Yes. The form was wrong. The math had been clean. The conclusion had been wrong. Dreth Soluz signed the directive without argument. Pelin noted this. He noted it in the way he noted things that would go into a report, not with judgment, just with accuracy. The senior warden had not said the word error. He had not said the word apology. He had opened a directive and signed it, and the signature meant the same thing without the words, and Pelin thought that was probably the right way to handle a mistake that the system itself had made rather than any person. He thought about the form with 17 fields and how confident it had looked, completed, stamped, sent to Dreth Soluz for a 40-second confirmation. He thought about how the form would now have 18 fields and how the 18th would have caught her and would catch the next one and the one after, and how there would be next ones, because she was not the first person from a Class 9 world to come through a cargo platform, and she would not be the last. And the platform had just found that out in 4 minutes and 17 seconds. She appeared at the compliance station door, while Dreth Soluz was still filing the directive. She had changed jackets. The one she was wearing now was the same cut as the first, slightly less worn, which suggested she had two and this was the better one. The cargo hook was on her belt. Pelin had not expected this. He had thought she would go back to her ship and he would transmit the fee adjustment and she would depart without further direct communication. She had other ideas. The docking fees, she said. Pelin looked at her. Dreth Soluz looked at her. She was looking at Pelin. They're waived, Pelin said. Extended stay also waived. Hull foam use, section seal execution, emergency containment services, all waived. The platform's liability review will. Good, she said. She looked at Dreth Soluz once, the kind of look that takes in a person's rank markings and amber collar patches and data pad in under 2 seconds and files all of it, and then she looked back at Pelin. Your C4 dispenser routing is going to need a recalibration cycle, she said. The trigger pressure is high. Someone's going to get foam in the wrong section if there's a next time. Pelin wrote this down. He wrote it in the supplemental field below the classification note because it had no other category. She left, the door closed. He heard her in the corridor for a moment, her crew, a short exchange, something about the starboard coupling, and then the sound of boots going toward Bay 7 and the sound of the Vosren's external hatch cycling. Drethsoluz looked at the closed door. "She didn't mention it," he said. "No," Pelin said. "The 4 minutes and 17 seconds. No." Drethsoluz's patches were still amber. He looked at the feed from the containment area, at Govrak on the bench, at the joint damage visible in the armor at the left knee. He looked at the hull foam in C4, 4 raiders sealed in up to their waists, waiting for the regional response team. He looked at Torvin's incident note, which was already in Pelin's queue, 3 sentences, the third of which read, "I recommend revision of the Orange Secondary Combat Assessment Criteria," and he looked at all of it for a while without saying anything. His patches did not go back to pale. Pelin finished the incident report over the next 40 minutes. The facts were simple, the categories were not. He logged the Rakthian cruisers, the boarding action, the casualties, none, which was a word he had to look at twice, because the breach alarm's projected outcome had used a different number, and this was better than that number by a factor that still did not feel real. He logged the platform security response. He logged the section seal and the hull foam containment and the regional response team's ETA. He logged the cargo hook. Personal item, hand-forged grip fiber, replaced multiple times, origin unknown, carried on crew member's belt throughout incident. No threat classification required. He looked at the last field for this entry. Status, inert. He typed it, he looked at it. It was the most accurate word on the form, and it was also, he had decided, the least accurate thing he had ever logged. The hook had not done anything. It had sat on her belt for 4 minutes and 17 seconds while she did what she had done without it, and it had not been a weapon and had not been a tool in the incident, and every field classification was correct, and the word inert was technically right in the way that yellow passive had been technically right, which was to say, it described what the form could see. He left it. A junior officer appeared at the door, Hessen, new to the morning shift, 3 weeks in, assigned to Pelin's station for observation hours. He had been in the secondary console room during the incident, which meant he had watched all of it on the secondary feed and had not been hurt, which was good, and had not done anything, which was also good because there had been nothing useful for him to do. He looked at the incident report on Pelin's screen. He looked at the cargo hook entry. "What was it for?" he said. "The hook." Pelin thought about the Calluses, about a grandfather running cargo on Verath in the first survey years before anyone had mapped the hazard rating, before anyone had built a form with 17 fields, running cargo with a hand-forged hook, because that was the tool available. About what you carry forward from someone who worked in 1.6 standard gravity for long enough that it changes what you are. About what that looks like on an Origin World supplemental form that nobody had thought to cross-reference until 4 minutes and 17 seconds made the gap obvious. He thought about all of this. He did not say any of it. "Cargo," he said. "It was for cargo." Hessen nodded and went back to the secondary console. Pelin looked at the supplemental field at the bottom of the incident report, below the standard 17 entries. He had been typing in it for 40 minutes. The final sentence had taken the longest. He had tried 6 versions and deleted 5, and the one that remained was the shortest and the plainest and the most accurate, and it was 11 words. He read it once. He submitted the report. The Vosren departed 2 days later, cleared by the regional response team and the liability review and the docking authority, which had asked no questions about the incident because the incident report was thorough and the fees had been waived, and the form had been completed correctly in all 17 fields, plus the supplemental. Pelin watched from the compliance station window. The ship was the same ship, patched hull plates, re-stenciled name, the starboard coupling now silent because someone had fixed it. It cleared the bay doors and made the first course correction and got smaller against the dark, and then it was gone. He went back to his console. The next manifest was already in the queue. He opened it. 43 line items. Standard cargo. Human crew, single name, no Origin World in the field. The form did not require it, and whoever had filed this one had not filled it in. Pellin opened the Origin World supplemental registry before he stamped anything. He typed the crew member's name into the cross-reference search. He waited. He read what came back. Then he opened the threat tier classification field and looked at it for a moment before he filled it in. He did this every time now. The last line of his incident report, the one that had taken him 40 minutes and 6 attempts, sat in the filed record where it would stay. 11 words, the form's only honest sentence. Human crew, Rain, S classification yellow passive. Recommend the form be revised.